Stevens is the perfect butler, a man who has dedicated his life to service. His appearance and manners are impeccable, he is always dignified, his speech poised, and his gaze focused and imperturbable. He believes that the main duty of a butler is not just to follow orders, but to anticipate them. Stevens believes that a true professional must be able to suppress his feelings and maintain absolute composure in any situation. However, his life, completely absorbed in work, left no room for personal attachments and experiences, which became evident only years later, when he received a letter from Miss Kenton, goes on a journey to meet her again and, perhaps, return the past. In the pages of her letter he read that her marriage had not been as joyous as she had expected, and now that the children had grown up and left home, she was living alone. This letter unexpectedly moved Stevens, made him think of the years he had spent with Miss Kenton at Darlington House, and all those moments when he could have acted differently, but preferred to suppress any expression of feeling within himself. At that moment he decides to go to her, perhaps with the hope of regaining something that has slipped away, though he cannot admit to himself exactly what it is he is looking for. This trip for him becomes not just a meeting with the past, but an attempt to rethink his own life. His journey takes him through the picturesque English countryside, and each new place he stops at triggers new memories of his service and of Lord Darlington, who has played a huge part in his life. Years ago, Darlington was an influential and respected man involved in political events that affected the fate of the country. Darlington's house was the place where the most influential men of his day came to discuss the future of Europe, especially in those years when the threat of a new war was raised. Lord Darlington sincerely believed he could avert disaster by forging ties with German diplomats, and Stevens, a loyal and devoted servant, witnessed these meetings, always performing his duties with deference and respect. Despite his loyalty, however, Stevens faced moral dilemmas that tested his professional principles. One such moment was Lord Darlington's decision to dismiss 2 Jewish maids when his views were influenced by anti-Semitic ideas spreading in certain circles in Europe. Miss Kenton, on learning of the decision, was outraged and openly opposed it, trying to get Stevens to intervene and speak to Lord Darlington. But Stevens concentrated on his role, dared not even express doubt about his master's decision. He watched the girls leave the house without even outwardly showing his attitude to what had happened, remaining outwardly indifferent, though inwardly he felt pain and embarrassment. Miss Kenton, disappointed by his inaction, perceived him as a man for whom principles were more important than people, which was the cause of their frequent quarrels and disagreements. She repeatedly threatened to leave, but stayed on, hoping that he would one day show a little feeling. Stevens did not realize that his coldness and nonchalance were perceived by her as a sign of indifference, even though he actually cared about her opinion. Reflecting back on their interactions, Stevens became increasingly aware that perhaps deep down he felt affection for Miss Kenton, but never allowed himself to realize it, considering the feelings inappropriate for a professional. One of the touching moments had to do with a book which Stevens was once reading in his room. Miss Kenton, seeing it, went in to see him, trying to find out exactly what he was interested in, and perhaps hoping for a closer conversation. He, however, answered her in a detached manner, saying that it was merely an affair of no value. Miss Kenton was disappointed, feeling that he was closed off to her and unwilling to let her into his life. As he travels, Stevens stops at inns and talks to ordinary people, simple villagers, who listen with interest to his stories of how he served an important lord, but show lively emotions and express their thoughts freely. These encounters make him reflect on his own life and the fact that he has always hidden behind a mask of restraint, avoiding even a hint of intimacy or sincerity. When Stevens finally arrives at Miss Kenton's house, he sees that the years have changed her. She has become more mature, calmer, her life has taken on a different meaning despite her disappointments. In their conversation, she admits that her marriage did not bring her complete happiness, but at the same time she found comfort and meaning in her family. Their conversation is filled with sadness and understatement. They reminisce about the years they spent together, the days when there was a certain connection between them, but which Stevens stubbornly ignored for fear of deviating from his principles. He realizes that Miss Kenton was the one person who tried to awaken a living feeling in him, but he refused to allow himself to open up. Now he realizes that he has missed something important, something that could have made his life complete. Miss Kenton, in turn, tells him that despite all the disappointments, she has no regrets about her life and has accepted what she has. Stevens, on the other hand, is left alone, realizing that his life has been empty despite his years of service and devotion. On his way back, he sits on a bench next to an old man who, unaware of Stevens' history, gives him wise advice about not sacrificing everything in life for work, that people should make time for themselves, For their emotions and joys, this conversation becomes the last straw for Stevens, which makes him think about the meaning of his own existence. Back in the mansion, now with a new owner, he begins his duties again, but his view of himself and his role has already changed. He no longer sees a higher meaning in the perfect performance of his duties, realizing that his life has been spent in self-denial and suppression of all natural human feelings.